you do feel lonely because you go to the grocery store or to the mall and you're the only one that's in a wheelchair. That's lonely. And or you're the only one at the table that can't pick up a fork and hold it in your hand. I think that's lonely because you're the only one that's going through it, and it's not someone right next to you that's going through the same thing.
There's a lot of downtime for me now where it's just me sitting at the house or me and mom running errands, where as much as I love my mom, I'm a 23-year-old kid that doesn't want to, I want to be out doing stuff. But because all my friends, they have jobs and they have things, school and things that they're doing, because we're not back in high school anymore, just running around doing what we want. There's a lot of downtime that I've had to learn to fill and try to avoid that lonely feeling. And there's definitely times where you feel lonely and you feel like people don't have time for you or they don't care about you, but really it's just they have a life too. And just because I'm not doing anything doesn't mean they're not busy living their life.
At some point, really, everybody does just kind of go back to their normal lives. So you aren't the big focus of that they're thinking about it all the time. So, but because of the spinal cord injury, I don't have the same ability to go out and socialize the way that I did before. So it's not so easy to call up and say, hey, you want to go to the mall or you want to go out to eat or to a nightclub? Because, I just simply can't do those things as easily anymore. So I found myself not even trying to socialize after a while and just trying to stay to myself. And then the hard part of, like I said, as a woman, you kind of feel like, guys aren't really into girls, in wheelchairs. So you just kind of write off dating. And certainly you feel uncomfortable anyway, even if you did try to talk to someone. And then there's feelings of mistrust, so for those reasons, you sometimes push people away, and that contributes to you feeling more lonely. Sometimes, so I guess in essence, sometimes you bring the loneliness on yourself, maybe without realizing it. I know I certainly did. I live alone now. I have my pets, but I live alone now. So even sometimes then, it's kind of like, wanting to talk to somebody, but not wanting to call and bug folks, or know if they're busy. So it's something, I think the loneliness is something that you deal with constantly. And it depends on the amount of lifestyle you choose to pursue, I think, in terms of whether the degree of loneliness that you have to cope with.
I do think it's normal for people to feel more isolated or more alone. If the world was full of people that had spinal cord injuries, more so than people that were up and walking, the walking people would feel more isolated and alone and different. When you're not part of a larger group, I think it's pretty common to feel lonely. I think in particular when people are in rehab and they're around people who are like themselves, they feel less lonely. They feel more part of a group. But when we're out now, it's like, wow, I may be the only person in my whole area that has a spinal cord injury. Like I'm the only one. It would be expected that you would feel a little bit lonely or a little bit isolated.
A lot of it, I think, is, feeling like people don't understand, whether they do or not, right? Talking to people that are depressed or people that are lonely, that's really common. Like nobody will understand what I'm going through. And it's really hard to explain that feeling unless you've been through it. Loneliness is a lot of wanting help but not knowing how to ask, right? Or wanting help and not knowing how to help yourself, or even what the help would be that you need. I think loneliness has a lot of overwhelming qualities to it in a way. it's really, it's hard to put into words the way that loneliness is.
More so, people had more trouble relating to me because they were accustomed to that person that they knew before my injury. And now I'm in a chair and I'm moving different, or I'm operating different, or I'm asking for help here and there, or I can't go that place because of it's not accessible, or did you even think about it being accessible? So having that type of discourse or conversation, all of that just felt weird. And I also found it difficult to kind of relate to my teammates again, because they were still running, jumping, and hooping, and I didn't have that same bond that I had with them after I got injured, because I was not there in the trenches with them. I was a part of the team, but I wasn't really a part of the team.
I think one thing I do hear from patients is that even if they have a plethora or like a big gang of cheerleaders, they still feel really alone in this process or this experience. I think that's really normal. More likely than none, no one's really understanding what you're going through other than people with a spinal cord injury. And I think that's really helpful when understanding the loneliness component, that there are other people out there and that you could be able to connect with them and they're able to relate a lot more.
Nobody knew what it was like to be you even before your injury. Okay, so I think sometimes we give the chair too much power. Having a disability is only one part of you, unless you make it all of you. So it would be expected that sometimes people may not know how to relate to you because people don't know how to relate to people who are different than them. And it's not just about disability. I think people are always more comfortable relating to people who are more like themselves, whether it's of the same race or the same gender or the same age group, working in the same occupation. So I would caution you to be careful to not make your chair or not make your disability a bigger part of your life than what it is. It's a small part. As you put yourself out there and you let people get to know other aspects of yourself, that maybe you have things in common with a group of people. Maybe you all like to go to movies. Maybe you all like to go to the ballet. Maybe you all like to go skeet shooting. Whatever it is that you like, I would encourage you to bring those things more in the front of the picture, because people can relate to those. And as they get to know you, then maybe you let them in more of the intimate parts of your life, including your disability. But it's not all about your disability, because you're more than that.
A lot of times if it happens, I'm like, don't do that. Don't do that. Like, I don't need that. I appreciate it. Because a lot of times it's just people being, they're being nice. They're trying to, but at the same time, I'm like, don't pity me. I have a hard time when I tell somebody my story. And I know it's just natural human reaction, because I would have done the same thing before my accident. Is they say, I'm so sorry. I'm like, don't be sorry. It's just, it's part of life. It's I don't want your pity. I don't want you to feel bad for me.
When people see you paralyzed, I think all good intention, but they feel the need to say something around hope, or you're gonna get up and walk. I can't tell you how many people, strangers and folks I knew, everybody, God just touched my heart to tell you that you are gonna walk again. And it just, after about the 30th time someone stops you and says that, you just kind of like, okay, well, have a nice day. People mean well. But what I wish the public would realize is that someone in a chair, the fact that they're not able to walk, don't treat it as somehow their whole goal in life has to be getting back to 2 feet in order for them to have a meaningful, full, and enjoyable life. There's no need to talk about whether or not you believe they're going to walk again, because if they never walk again, they can still enjoy themselves. But constantly being told, I think you're going to walk again. Oh, and then there's the people that send you the emails. Have you looked into this? It's like, Yeah, no, I haven't. I don't know what to tell you. So, you get bombarded with all of that stuff, you know. And then you get the people that just feel sorry for you and, oh, baby, you just come here, the moms, my best friend's mom. Oh, baby, oh, I've been so scared to see you. Oh, and she just want to come and hug. And it's just like, ugh, people, just treat me like I'm a regular person, So it takes time for people to get over it and be normal.
I don't think pity is the right answer. I think overcompensation is kind of the general thing that I run into, right? I go to a restaurant, go out to eat, right? The hostess is rushing to the door to open this door for me, right? Running. And it's things of that nature, people doing things out of the goodness of their heart, but not really understanding that they're kind of taking away your independence as well when they do stuff like that, right? I can open my door, I can pull the chair out and move it if I need to, and I appreciate them trying to help, but I think their way of being nice comes across as pity.
I remember going to Chick-fil-A, shaking, weak. They opened the door for me. I hated that. People looking at me at Chick-fil-A. I didn't want people to label me as handicapped or disabled. I couldn't stand that word. I remember kids. That's even funnier. The kids would come out the bathroom and they was just looking at me like this, staring. I'm like, oh, crap. That was my first experience. Somebody just staring at me in awe, like, well, he looks different, and saying, oh, he's a handsome guy. So my mindset just went berserk then, like, oh man, I don't want nobody to watch me. I don't want nobody to look at me. So that brought on anxiety now, to where when I left the comfort of Shepherd, I still didn't deal with that. And me going out, I was scared to be seen, or I would, I used to love being in the sun, like put my face in the sun, you see but now I'm self-conscious. Even now I got a scar. You want to put my full face into the sun, you could see all my frailty, because I was so used to being who I was, and that change was very difficult for me. And it brought on some insecurities that I've gotten better at. But it's a time frame to everything. It's a time frame to everything.
If it's a new friend or somebody I'm trying to hang out with for the first time, or I haven't hung out with them in a long time, more of me sometimes wanting to stay in the house is, do I trust this person enough yet for them to take care of something if it were to happen while we're out? Do I trust this person to be able to help me transfer if something happens where I can't, or do little things that I know I might need if it came down to it? Do I trust them yet to leave the house? And so that's really the only times I kind of hesitate to get out and go do something. Or if I've been having bowel or bladder issues, I might hesitate to want to go somewhere or do something. But other than that, not really. I'm wanting to get out and I'm wanting to move on with life and kind of figure out my new normal, I guess.
Seeing people for the first time after my injury also gave me a lot of anxiety, because it's kind of that feeling. And remember, we talked about self-esteem. We talked about, lacking confidence. So when you run into people or see people for the first time afterwards, you already kind of feel different. You know that they're looking at you different. You assume that they're pitying you, and you don't like that feeling. And it makes you, to me, it made me anxious, because I didn't know kind of what to expect or how to act around people. And I didn't want people to look at me as just, a shell of a person, or less, or half a person. But I also didn't want to hear a lot of that, you're going to make it through this. I didn't want all the cheerleading, and, that would make me upset. So I didn't really know what I wanted when I ran into people. Mostly I wanted to avoid running into people I hadn't seen since before my injury.
I think oftentimes people said, when I do isolate myself, why is that? And I think one thing, the underlying sort of theme is that maybe you're just uncomfortable where you are in terms of your injury yourself, right? So if you're uncomfortable already, you're probably not going to put yourself in a vulnerable position because you were yourself already vulnerable with this injury. The way I do is break it into smaller components. If people are like, oh, just, woman up or man up, go out and do something with our friends and family, that's a large step to take. So let's something a little bit smaller. And if it's uncomfortable being out in a wheelchair, let's work on that. And one way I do it is one of my patients, she had a really hard time. She's a mother and a wife, and she had a large family, and they loved family gatherings and restaurants. She could not wrap her head around that. And so what we did was starting it slow and feeling more comfortable in her wheelchair. So what she did was every day she would go out to help her husband get the mail in the neighborhood and then come back home. And with that sort of slow, gradual exposure, she was able to see her neighbors and see that the interaction wasn't as bad as she thought. They were actually talking to her exactly the way she was. They gave her that sort of boost that, hey, maybe I'm able to kind of get out of this sort of hole of loneliness and being able to reconnect with the world. So as she started doing that, she kind of went a little bit further. And at some point, she felt comfortable enough and less isolated that she was able to go into the community and have dinner with her family.
I think it's pretty common, too, that people have this notion of, I don't want people to see me like this. And I challenge people, what is like this? And it usually comes back to being in the chair or having the disability. And it's a common feeling that people have. But I think as you build confidence in yourself and you take on more control of your life, I think you put yourself out there differently. I think you're more willing to put yourself out there as you're more comfortable in your own skin. It's pretty common in the beginning of somebody's injury that they're not as comfortable in their own skin with their disability because they haven't lived with that as long as they've lived with themselves prior to their injury. Areas that you can take charge of where you're going to have less anxiety about being out. For example, make sure that you're managing your bowel program and your bladder program on a regular basis so you have less chance of an accident happening, which then makes you feel uncomfortable being out there. If you take care of those parts of your life that create your angst and you have those under control, like I said about with bowel and bladder, then you're probably going to be more comfortable putting yourself out there. The other challenge is sometimes in order for that discomfort to go away, we actually have to do something. I have a lot of people say to me, I will go out, I will spend time with friends when I feel better. Well, if we sit around and wait till we feel better, we're never going to go out. Sometimes the act of going out is the thing that makes us feel better. And if we do that once and we feel better, chances are we're going to repeat that again. So take control of what you can in order to make the going out an easier thing to do. And maybe what you do is you go out initially with one or two people that you feel really close to and you feel really comfortable with. And maybe you venture out just a little bit. It's kind of like you just dip your toe in the water a little bit before you take a full plunge in. Let's say you were nervous about going out with a group of friends to some new activity, or you were going out with a group of people that you didn't know that well before injury. Go back and kind of think of what did you do to get through that? How did you build yourself up? How did you gain confidence to sort of take that leap? And utilize some of those tools, because just because you have this injury doesn't mean everything that you've had in your past has to change. You can bring some of that with you and help you as you maneuver through here.
For me, I would find people, on YouTube or Instagram, Facebook, and I would see them and the community, like the spinal cord injury community, and kind of read things and that I would relate to them, and it would make me feel less lonely, like someone out there was going through the same thing that I was, and that helped a lot.
When you do feel lonely, how do you kind of work your way through it? there's some very different ways to go about it. And I think it kind of makes you think, how did you deal with your loneliness before? Was there a moment in time that you felt really lonely? What did you do to feel less isolated? That's the first step. If you're able to say, like, you know what, it was when I reached out to a family friend, that could be the first step of just kind of getting out of that shell. Another way that you might want to feel less isolated is maybe reaching out to people who might be in similar situations. So there's a lot of support groups, whether online or in person. That's another way to kind of start feeling less isolated, especially in this journey of recovery and rehab.
You know, at times when I think we're most vulnerable is when we feel lonely or we feel like we have to tackle something totally by ourselves. And, you know, there may not be somebody professionally that you can go talk with, and that may not be something that's needed anyway. I think sometimes when we feel lonely, regardless of disability or not, sometimes what we need to do is sort of fill that loneliness. And how did you do that before? Is it that you called a friend up and said, hey, I just need you to come sit with me? Or can we go and do something? Can we go spend some time together? It may be that you found an activity that you like doing that occupied your mind, that actually gave you fulfillment. So in looking at loneliness, I'm also not saying that we have to avoid it. Sometimes I think we learn a lot when we sit in some of that loneliness. I think that it gives us an opportunity to really sort of mull over about, you know, why are we lonely? Is it because it's something that we're doing? You know, maybe we're not putting ourselves out there. Maybe we're not taking the steps and the actions needed. Maybe we're just waiting for everybody else to do something for us. But again, pull back in your head of if there were times in your life you were lonely before, how did you fill that void? Did you spend time with family? Did you spend time with friends? Did you go somewhere? Did you try something new? Don't negate things that worked for you before.
If you don't feel like talking or reaching out to folks, that's normal too. There's other ways to kind of just do this as a solo sort of experience. Maybe going online, reading blogs, or watching videos on YouTube about people's sort of experiences of their own injury might be helpful for you too.
For additional resources, please visit our website.